What is going on, everybody? So I am back today. If you see the title of the video, I've noticed lately there's a trend going on online where everyone is talking about their favorite films of the decade so far and the best movies that they've watched of the decade. And I think that that's been a lot of fun to kind of read people's lists and see what their favorite films are. But I thought it would be fun to do a series since the decade has been pretty short so far. We're only in the third year of the decade, to talk about some underrated films that I don't think get as much attention as a lot of those films that are talked about. Obviously, I've talked about some of my favorite films of 2020. I'm thinking of Ending Things, Possessor, Minari, Shiva Baby, a lot of movies that I feel like were talked about quite a bit that people really enjoyed a lot. But today, what I wanted to do is tell you guys some films from the year 2020 that I feel like weren't talked about as much and that weren't discussed as much as some of the films that were higher up on my list that were some of my favorites. I'm planning on doing a video for 2020, 2021, and 2022 because 2023 is not over yet, but at least those 3 years. So without further ado, let's get into it right now. So first up, I want to talk about the film Black Bear starring Aubrey Plaza and Christopher Abbott. I feel like this movie had a little bit of buzz around it when it was first released because of it starring Christopher Abbott and Aubrey Plaza, but in the film community as a whole, I don't feel like I saw this movie talked about all that much, and I thought this thing was absolutely phenomenal. It's really unique in that it feels like two separate stories. Obviously, Aubrey Plaza and Christopher Abbott are both our two lead characters. In the first segment of the story, Aubrey Plaza is going to this cabin in the middle of the woods to kind of unwind and, figure things out about her life. And through a certain set of circumstances, she meets Christopher Abbott's character, who is married to this woman. They're all hanging out together. It's all about this singular event through this very short period of time. Well, then hard cut in the middle of the movie. The second half of the movie is they're at the same cabin, but Aubrey Plaza is an actor in a film being directed by Christopher Abbott. And I think the movie has a lot of really interesting things to say. It's very psychologically riveting. Both the performances from our lead actors are absolutely incredible. It's super subversive. It does a lot of really interesting things with such a small, tight location. And this was streaming on Prime Video for a really long time. I'm sure it's probably still available there to watch. And it's 100% worth checking out. It's one of my favorite movies of 2020, and I'm surprised more people didn't talk about it. Up next is going to be one of my favorite horror films in recent memory, and that is Brian Bertino's The Dark and the Wicked. I remember seeing this on Shudder and being absolutely floored by it. This is very much in the same vein of like an Ari Aster type of horror movie where it's very quiet and refined, but when it gets scary, it gets very scary. It's a very simple story about a brother and a sister who their father is getting very sick, and at the beginning of the movie their mother dies, and so they are forced to go live in this secluded farmhouse with their father who is very ill, and strange things start happening to the both of them. This movie has such high anxiety filled tension. It's not reliant on jump scares. There are a couple through the movie. So much more of this is about what the camera hangs on and forces you to stare at. This movie scared the crap out of me, and it's very hard for a movie to genuinely make me jump or feel fearful, and this movie does it in droves. There were so many scenes that I was just like shaking because of how uncomfortable that I was, and I always recommend this movie to people who enjoy horror because I think it hits all the hallmarks of any type of horror lover, whether you love more nuanced indie horror or you like just genuinely scary big budget blockbuster horror. I feel like Brian Bertino hits the nail on the head right in the middle to appeal to both lovers of both sides of that genre. And yeah, if you haven't seen The Dark and the Wicked, highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. Up next is going to be a very small-scale film called The Killing of Two Lovers, directed by Robert Machoyan. So this movie really took me by surprise. I didn't know anything about it before I went into it, but it's essentially about a man who is going through a divorce with his wife. His wife is dating someone new, and the things that he is going through while they are going through the divorce. This thing is a brief hour and 20-minute runtime with some really hard-hitting emotional punches. The cinematography in this thing is absolutely incredible. The sound design is really eerie and unsettling. The performances in it are absolutely fantastic. And what I really liked about this is, obviously, you know, divorce is very common in our society. Seeing people go through it is common, but seeing the psyche of this character and how he approaches going about his divorce, and when he oversteps his bounds and when he does things that he probably shouldn't do, but because he loves his kids and he thinks having this whole familial unit is going to be better for them in the future, it's just really hard hitting. And I feel like there's something in here that, especially if you're a person who's been around divorce or experienced divorce, you're going to get something out of this movie. But I think that even regardless of that, the dramatic punches in this thing are handled so well that you'll find something to appreciate in it. Up next, I have to mention a film from someone who I actually did an interview with on my podcast, who is just genuinely a wonderful human being, and that is the film My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To, from director Jonathan Cuartas. Jonathan is just an absolutely wonderful human being, truly just one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and his movie floored me. I remember when I watched this movie on Shudder when it was first added to the channel, I was absolutely blown away by the performances and the cinematography and the pacing of this thing. It really packs a hard-hitting emotional punch in the best way imaginable. That is because there's horror that exists in this movie, but aside from the horror, it's just a really great familial drama that I feel like the characters are built up so well, and there are questions that are left unanswered about these characters, and that you kind of build up a story for in your mind, but the simple part of the premise gives you enough to where things that happen to these characters throughout the runtime of the film, just like, it's like sticking a knife in you and twisting it really hard. It's just so painful to watch, and it's all because of the three incredible lead performances in this movie. I think what John was able to do with his directorial debut here was absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to see whatever he works on next. If you haven't seen My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To, I have raved and praised this movie again and again and again. It's one of my favorite vampire movies of all time, and I 100% recommend that you go check it out. Up next is going to be the film Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, from director Eliza Hittman. And I feel like I've seen this a little bit more in the film community, and this is a very simplistic story about a girl in a young conservative town who gets pregnant, who does not have the ability to get an abortion in the town that she lives in. Her and her friend decide to drive from Pennsylvania to New York City together from their conservative town so that she can get an abortion. And it is a very simple story. It takes place over, I think, just a couple of days, but the emotional punch that this thing packs is so heavy and so well executed, and is really poignant when you think about society today and what women are fighting for when it comes to reproductive rights. And I think Eliza Hittman does such a phenomenal job, not only with the direction of the performers in this, because I think both of our lead actors do a phenomenal job in this movie, but I think that this is a movie that anyone can watch and feel something truly powerful from. So many people are out there fighting actively against people having reproductive rights, and I think watching a movie like this will say something to you and speak to you in a way that might make you understand the other side if you're someone who opposes that. And I think that the movie does such a great job with it. It's one of my favorite movies of 2020, and I highly recommend you check it out. Up next, and you knew it was coming if you know me, Psycho Gore Man from director Steven Kostanski. This is probably one of my favorite horror comedies of all time. I did not know anything about this movie when I went into it. I had no idea what I was getting into. I've seen this movie probably 10, 11 times now since I first watched it. It is so much fun. It's silly, campy, over the top, with great practical effects, great performances. It's just an absolute blast. The lead actress who plays Mimi, who, if you're unfamiliar with the plot of this, it's about a young girl and her brother who stumble upon this like little amulet thing that they're able to control this all-powerful demon god creature called Psycho Gore Man, and it is just the most unhinged, hilarious, fun movie that you can ever watch. It reminds me of something from a completely different era. The soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. The practical effects, like I said, are just bar none some of my favorite I've seen in a movie in a very long time. Steven Kostanski is clearly a very passionate director who is incredibly talented at what he does, and this movie just really brought a smile to my face the entire time I watched it. It's absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't seen Psycho Gore Man, please, please, please go watch it. It is so much fun. And then last up on my list, if you know me at all, I've mentioned this movie a ton of times on my TikTok. I think I've talked about it a few times on my YouTube channel as well. But Evan Morgan's The Kid Detective, starring Adam Brody. This has become one of my favorite films of the decade, just period. And I'm really upset that more people haven't talked about it, or that it hasn't gotten like a big push for more people to watch it, because I think it does a really great job balancing comedy and drama in a way that not a lot of movies do. And in short, the premise of the film, Adam Brody, when he was very young, was a kid detective for his school. He was very smart. He solved all these cases for his school. He was really close to this young girl. And one day, the young girl who he's really close with disappears, and they can't find her. And he spends all his time and his energy trying to track her down and to find her, and he fails, and he can't do it. So we jump forward to him in his 30s. He's a washed up alcoholic who still has an office as a detective trying to solve these cases, but he doesn't really do much anymore. He's living at home with his parents. His life is an absolute wreck. And one day, this young girl comes into his office and says that her boyfriend was murdered, and asks if he'll help find her boyfriend. And the movie is him trying to help her find the people who killed her boyfriend, while uncovering all of this information that may lead to a connection with the disappearance of his friend from all those years ago. It is just such an incredibly well-directed movie. It's suspenseful. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's hilarious at moments. Adam Brody's performance is absolutely phenomenal. This is a movie that from the year 2020, you have to watch this thing at least once. It's incredible. I bought the Blu-ray as soon as I rented it online because I just loved it so much. And yeah, I've praised this movie a million times, but it is 100% worth it. So what are some of your favorite films from the year 2020 that maybe not a lot of people have talked about? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what some of your favorites are, because maybe I missed something, and maybe there's a movie I haven't seen, and I'm always looking to add more movies to this list. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.